everybody, it's Mr. Wagstaff. Welcome back to another exciting episode of Economic and Personal Finance. We're still in our unit here on economic basics. Today, we're going to be talking very much about competition and the opportunities and choices that you have to make. All right, let's go ahead and get started. All right, so we're going to start out today talking about the concept of opportunity cost. You're thinking, Mr. Wagstaff, what is opportunity cost? So remember, if in an economy, if there was no concept of scarcity, meaning that there was the same amount of stuff as there was wants, if supply and demand matched each other, then there would be no need for economics. But there's a limited supply of stuff and an unlimited supply of wants. So if you have the resources to purchase or to buy something, all right, you probably have the resources to buy something else. So there's a whole concept in economics called opportunity cost, in which it basically looks at what your choice was and the choice you didn't take. Let's simplify it here, all right? On an individual level here, say you have $5 and you want to buy lunch. You have a choice between a $5 cheeseburger or a $5 pizza. Obviously, I would assume more than one slice. I don't know. But you have a choice between cheeseburger and pizza. You like both, but you have to make a choice. Is it A or B? Opportunity cost, all right? What did it cost you if you went with the cheeseburger? It cost you the pizza. Basically, opportunity cost is the choice you didn't make, all right? So as you expand this to the larger concept of economics, all right, what you don't choose is very impactful. So you basically have to weigh the pros and cons of both and basically choose the one that you want. There's like two positives that you want. You choose the one that you want. Opportunity cost refers to basically like your lost opportunity on the other one. So if you got the cheeseburger, you might love the cheeseburger and come find out like your friend bought the pizza and the pizza was trash. Hooray, that's great. But the opportunity cost is still the pizza. It's still the choice you didn't make. On a business level, say there's a car factory. Opportunity cost would mean they have enough resources to produce either a brand new type of sports car or a brand new type of pickup truck. And they can only produce one. They don't have the resources to be able to make both the sports car and the pickup truck, so they have to choose. They might be like, ooh, we can probably get more money for the sports car because it's going to be a super high-end sports car, but we can probably sell more units of the pickup truck. And they have to make a choice. And if they pick the car, the opportunity cost, all right, the choice they didn't take, is going to be the truck. Because sure, they can make money off of both of them, but when they only have the ability to pick one, the one they don't choose, that's the cost that they're giving up. It costs them an opportunity. All right. So the opportunity cost is really designed to measure the investments that you're willing to make, whether it's the cheeseburger, the pizza, whether it's which one you're picking. It basically is designed to evaluate the different investments and the possible interactions and decisions that you could have made. So the question here is explain what an opportunity cost is and what it is designed to measure. So just got done talking about that. So pause me, answer that completely, and we're moving on. So this brings us to identifying opportunity cost. What is opportunity cost? Well, the vast majority of the time, it's money. You're like, wait, what? Or more clearly, the price you spend, all right? The amount of money that you spend. So say you have $300. There is a video game console that you want to buy that's $300, and there is also a trip you want to take that's $300. All right, you only have a certain amount of resources, so the cost. All right, or let me back up. Actually, I'm going to confuse you on that. Let's back up. Let's just talk about the video game console. That's your choice. Buy a video game console, you have $300. You can either take that money and spend it on something else, or you can spend it on the Xbox. All right. So the opportunity cost to get, I say Xbox, whatever game console it is, and $300 would be probably a pretty good price. So if you're going to spend that money on the Xbox, you're giving up that money for that game console. That alone, a lot of times, is considered the opportunity cost because you're paying money. So the price, a lot of times, is the opportunity cost because you no longer have that $300. You don't have the opportunity to spend it somewhere else. So a lot of times, the opportunity cost can be simplified down into money. However, and as a social studies teacher, I love the social studies references here. Opportunity cost basically comes down to where you're spending your time and your resources. All right. So Abraham Lincoln had a famous quote that if he had 6 hours to chop down a tree, he'd spend the first 4 hours sharpening the axe. All right, because he's basically saying if I spend the opportunity cost of the time when everybody else is chopping down trees, and it's like a tree chopping down competition, and everybody's just, all right, 6 hours go, and everybody starts chopping, he's going to make sure his axe is super sharp first. He'll spend most of his time, all right, most of his opportunities here to sharpen his axe, because his axe will be so sharp, he can cut down more trees with a sharp axe, all right, in 2 hours than everybody else can with a dull axe in 6 hours. So there's a trade-off here on what you're going to commit your time and your resources towards. This, in Abraham Lincoln's mind, the opportunity cost is the smartest thing to do is to spend those first 4 hours, instead of chopping down a tree, he's going to sharpen his axe. He is giving up time to chop down the tree in hopes that his investment in sharpening his axe will pay off in the long run. That is opportunity cost. So what was the opportunity cost when Abraham Lincoln here decided to sharpen an axe? It was cutting down trees for 4 hours. He gave that up. But in the long run, in his mind, that will pay off. So everything that we do in life has an opportunity cost. Everything that we do. Do I need to study more for this test or watch another episode of my show? Everything has an opportunity cost. One of the biggest opportunity costs that is going to affect seniors in high school is the decision whether or not they go get a job or they go to college. All right. And when I say college, I mean going anywhere else and like furthering your education. If you want to go be a welder, going to a trade school, something like that. Not necessarily talking about a 4-year degree. But a lot of times when you go to college, and I know there's some trade schools and internship programs that you can get paid while you're doing it, you're basically not making any money while you're going to college, and then you have to pay them money. Whereas you could just not go to college and you could go down the street and you could get a job working full time and making money. So in the short term, you're making money, the person in college is not making any money. However, all right, research typically shows that people that further their education in some capacity and then get a job in the field that they further their education in do overall make considerably more money than people who don't. So the opportunity cost, all right, is the choice you don't make. So if you decide to go get a job and work full time, your opportunity cost in this, if these were your two choices, was going to college. Whereas if you go to college, the opportunity cost you're giving up is to be able to go make money. So opportunity cost comes down to all the choices that you make, and the opportunity cost, what opportunity did it cost you, is the choice you didn't make. So the question here is, give an example of an opportunity cost in your own life, and this is specific to you. So pause me, answer that in complete sentences, and we're moving on. So competition rules everything in business. In a mixed economy, more of a market economy that we have, it's a mixed economy, but more on the market side of the mixed aspect of that. Competition is incredibly, incredibly important in keeping our economy working well. All right. So competition is literally the idea that two businesses are trying to compete for the limited amount of resources, and the limited amount of resources here would be people's money. So you have two companies, we'll say like, well, we already started talking about the game consoles here. Xbox and PlayStation. They compete with each other. All right. So which one would you buy if they're relatively similar? And businesses go out of the way to make sure you have brand loyalty. But a lot of times it comes down to like which one is better and cheaper, and that's variable. So competition usually is good for the consumer like us because they're competing against each other to get a better product at a cheaper price. There is a fictional idea, meaning this is not real, all right? And we know it, but it's basically what we measure it by. How close can you get to perfect competition? A perfect competition is an ideal society where everybody is making multiple aspects of the same thing. They compete with each other to bring prices down, bring quality up. Perfect competition is a thing that can't actually exist because nothing is perfect in society. However, basically every market is compared to how close are they to perfect competition. Knowing you can never actually get to perfect competition, perfect competition is the desire for the market to perfectly compete with each other, and it benefits the consumer the most. So perfect competition is like you can get the same product from anybody. It's super high quality, perfect knowledge of it, the prices, the technology, large buyers and sellers, no artificial restrictions, no shipping costs. Like there's all these things that are just, while some companies can really put all their eggs in one basket and have a couple of these, and a couple markets have some of these things, it would be impossible for any market to be perfect in competition. This is just the imaginary ideal that we use to measure markets by. How close are they to being a perfect, imperfect competition? So this brings you to imperfect competition. This is the opposite of perfect competition. Is where everything's trash. Now, let me clarify, since nothing can actually be perfect competition because that's imaginary and you can't actually do it, but markets usually strive, especially by the consumer's perspective, to try to reach a perfect competition. All markets are imperfect. But the really imperfect, the absolute trash ones are the ones that we're going to talk about here some today. Oligopoly and a monopoly, which are two different things. This is where the market is very skewed, usually in favor of whoever controls it, not the consumer. So we're going to talk about some current examples of that here in a minute, but that is considered an imperfect competition. There's another word that we're going to use all the time in this course, and that's labor. So labor specifically talks about workers, like if you're an employed worker, you would be a part of the labor force. Physical exertion, a specific task. Labor unions collectively. Labor is the things used to make stuff. Or people. It is really, labor is people, right? And having to like pay somebody's salary would be having to pay like labor cost. Another word not to be confused with labor is capital. Capital is stuff used to make money. So, like Amazon, who delivers stuff everywhere, their company vehicles, that would be capital. Without those vehicles, or without anybody to deliver their stuff, they couldn't stay in business. So while the capital usually costs money, in this case Amazon and their cars, it is a necessary thing in order to keep their business model up and running. If you have a fancy piece of machinery that makes, I don't know, whiz bangers, and there's a big market for whiz bangers, and everybody wants to buy your whiz bangers, and you have your whiz banger machine, all right, the capital is the amount of money or whatever you use to buy or purchase or make the whiz banger machine. The whiz banger machine itself is capital, all right? So it's a piece of machinery used to make money and to be successful. And it doesn't have to be machinery. Capital, a lot of times, is just straight money. If you've ever heard the term, you have to have money to make money. Say you want to go buy 5 houses, all right, so that you can rent them all out and make money. If each one of those houses is $200,000, you have to have $1 million. If you buy 5 houses at $1 million and then you start making money and you start making $5 million over the years off of that $1 million investment, that's great. But who has $1 million laying around? Well, if you did and you spent that $1 million to buy 5 houses in order to make more money, that $1 million would be considered capital. So capital is the tools or money or anything that you have that is designed to help make you more money. So it's basically the things that, again, help you make a profit. So the question is, explain what perfect competition is and what its influence it has on the market. So I want to talk about it. So perfect competition is this ideal perspective to where there's mass amount of producers and a huge amount of buyers and everything is great. Perfect competition is important is because it's what a market is measured by. This is the preferred method of work in the eyes of the consumer. Not necessarily is a perfect competition are you going to have multi-billionaires in society. But companies should be able to make money. They should have very quality products, and they should be able to sell it at a reasonable price, and the consumers are happy and all the businesses are happy. So the perfect competition is basically the measuring stick for how effective a market. If it gets too far away into the imperfect market idea, that's when the government can get involved, and we're getting ready to talk about that. So pause me, answer that completely, and we're moving on. So there's two main types of imperfect economies that we're going to talk about. First one we're going to talk about is an oligopoly. So an oligopoly, all right, and you're like, oh, what is it? So you may have heard of a monopoly, and we're going to talk about that in a second, where like one person owns everything. If you've had me for other history classes, we've mentioned it, robber barons and stuff like that. An oligopoly is not a monopoly. It has a whole different word to it. So this is when a market structure with a small number of firms or a small number of businesses, none of which can keep the others from having significant influence. What does that mean, Mr. Wagstaff? Coke and Pepsi. That's an oligopoly. Sure, there are other sodas out there. You got Cheerwine if you're from North Carolina, South Carolina. That's just a local thing. If you're from, Oregon, you've never heard of Cheerwine because that's just a local thing. Dr. Pepper is actually not part of either one of those. Well, might have blown your mind on that one. Dr. Pepper is its own standalone company. But Coke and Pepsi are a perfect example of an oligopoly because they own it's like 2 or 3 companies own like over 80% of the market. Coke and Pepsi, this isn't great for the consumers. If you go to a store, even though Cheerwine, and I'm talking about North Carolina here, if you go to the store and buy Cheerwine, usually Cheerwine is cheaper than Pepsi and Coca-Cola. Even though Cheerwine makes a less profit off of their drinks than Coke and Pepsi do. Coke and Pepsi realize they don't have a lot of competition, so as long as Coke and Pepsi basically wink, wink, nod, nod, basically agree not to like undercut each other to a crazy amount, then you're either going to buy a Coke or Pepsi. So oligopoly is far from being a perfect competition because there's no necessarily reason for them to reduce prices and up the quality. All right, they just have to basically like keep the status quo there. So the more competition in a market, the better for the consumer. All right, and this is usually why Cheerwine, who probably makes less money than Pepsi and Cheerwine, or makes less money than Pepsi and Coca-Cola per each bottle sold, realizes that to get people to buy theirs, since Coke and Pepsi have such a stranglehold on the market, they have to sell theirs for less. Here's another one. And here recently it's gotten better, quote unquote. Let's talk about cell phone companies. AT&T and Verizon for a long time. Now there's other companies coming out, T-Mobile and stuff like that. But AT&T and Verizon were really for a long time the only 2 cell phone companies. And they just kept raising their rates. Because why not? Where else are you going to go? As long as Verizon and AT&T were in somewhat of competition with each other as an oligopoly, where else are you going to go? This is why these other companies, when they come out, their rates just seem crazy low. They're like, sometimes their rates are so low, you're like, there must be something wrong with it. It's not. That's what AT&T and Verizon could both charge and still make a profit. But why? When they're like, oh, we're going to compete with each other. But they both understand that if one of them really drops their prices, it's going to hurt the market. So neither one of them are willing to do that because they both make money off of each other. Another example of this is Apple and Samsung on the actual cell phones themselves. they own at this point like almost 90% of the market share. Meaning you're either going to buy an Apple or a Samsung. Those are your two phones. There are other companies, but Apple and Samsung, they also would be considered oligopoly in the cell phone market because there's just a couple companies that own the vast majority of the market share. So the question here is, explain what an oligopoly is and give an example of this in our modern society. So pause me, answer that completely. We're moving on. All right. So we're going to hop in here to monopoly. If you've had me before, we've heard me talk about robber barons and stuff in previous classes, but I'm going to assume you don't know what a monopoly is. It's not the board game. Also, bet you thought this dude had a eyepiece. He does not. That's the whole thing. I teach psychology. It's a whole nother Anyway, the Monopoly, you're like, yes, he does. You just got a picture of him here without it. No, he doesn't. Here's another picture of him. He does not have a monocle. He doesn't. So Monopoly, not necessarily the board game, even though the whole point of the board game is to basically take everybody else's stuff and control everything. That is what a monopoly is. That's why it's named after a monopoly. A monopoly is when one company owns everything. This is the furthest possible thing from perfect competition. This is as imperfect as you can get. There is no competition. Competition is good for consumers and people who want to buy stuff because they will compete with each other and bring price down. If there's just two companies, Coke and Pepsi, they will kind of wink, wink, nod, nod. We're going to compete with each other. They're not. The airline industries is another oligopoly. They set the market. It's like two or three companies. If you have a whole bunch of different companies, that's when price comes down because they're all finagling for the best market share. So monopolies. Are there any monopolies today? So we talked about in the 1800s, if having for U.S. history, if people owned the steel industry, that the government will come out, they'll split it up, and they'll bust up these trust and monopolies for this course is pretty much interchangeable. So there is still a monopoly today, and it is an identified monopoly, and it's Microsoft. The weird thing about Microsoft is that the government has gone in and called this a monopoly, and they've had restrictions on it. However, it's kind of a weird situation that Microsoft makes a product that everybody likes so much that there's not really any demand for another product. Now that has changed here in a little bit. You're like, Microsoft, what? This is Bill Gates, by the way, if you don't know who that is. He was at one point, might still be, I don't know, one of the richest men in the world. He was at one point the richest man in the world. Anyway, Microsoft makes their money off of their operating system. So if you're on a PC right now, all right, there's a chance you're running like Windows 11, and that is made by Microsoft. You're like, yeah, but I didn't pay for it. Aha, but you did. When you bought your computer, it came on it. If you went to Best Buy and bought that operating system, which is just a CD, actually it's probably just a download, you wouldn't have to just download it online. It's like $300, all right, to buy it. But what happens is Microsoft goes to the computer companies and say, I'll give it to you at a huge discount for like $100. Keep in mind, it's just an algorithm like that he thought up, that Bill Gates thought up. So it's like pure profit. And he sells it to the computer companies at a lot cheaper, all right? So the computer companies like this are buying it cheaper, and then people will buy their product because it already has an operating system on it. And then they can just charge more for their computers because it already has Windows on it. Windows was the only thing that existed. Here, if you're having me for a virtual, now Google Chrome has come out, and Google Chrome, like if you have a Chromebook, they don't use Windows, they use their Chrome operating system. That is, has now actually the second largest operating system used over Apple. So Apple's operating system is because it's so expensive to buy the hardware of Apple. Anyway, because Microsoft owns basically the entire market share, all right, or at least over 80%, they are considered a monopoly. That is really concerning, and the government comes in and basically has oversight of Microsoft to make sure they don't, because if Microsoft's just like, it's $6,000 a computer now. If Microsoft did that and society needs computers and needs operating systems, it could cause a big issue. So even though they've been officially called a monopoly and there has been some regulations placed on them, It can still exist because there's really not a competitor with just the operating system, because like the Mac operating system for Apple has to be on an Apple device. The Windows can be on any device. So the question here is, explain how monopoly and perfect competition are the complete opposite of each other. So we sat there, we talked about that in depth. So answer that completely, answer in 2 complete sentences. And that's what I got for you guys today. See you guys tomorrow.